Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with Politics Tonight. In response to escalating economic concerns, in July 2023, the federal government declared food insecurity a national emergency and ordered the immediate release of fertilizers and grains to farmers and households to mitigate the adverse effect of fuel subsidy removal. Furthermore, the government announced plans to enhance security measures to safeguard farmers from armed attacks and kidnappers. However, despite these efforts, challenges persist. Tonight, to take a look at the complexities of the situation and explore potential pathways towards sustainable solutions. My guest tonight is African farmer Mogaji, the former chairman, Agri Group Lagos Chambers of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Mogaji. So good to see you again in the new year.
Same here.
I remember the last time we had this conversation was in July when the president here.
About 8 months ago.
And we're discussing this again. So first, let me have you react to one of the reports we played earlier before coming back on air, where the Kano State Public Complaints and Anti-Corruption Commission uncovered warehouses where essential commodities were stashed.
Well, I think Kano State needs to be fair on these merchants. They know these merchants. These merchants ideally buy grains around November, December, and store them up. They take loans from banks. That's their business. They buy, they keep, and sell around May, June. That's their business, legitimate business, which I'm sure they are paying taxes on. The warehouses are not hidden warehouses, okay? So, in fact, you know, everything's about perspective. Instead of foreigners coming in to mop up and go, and they do it every day in the northern states, every day in the season, these people buy the grains and store it. So it stays within the country. Because we have a national challenge does not mean you should stigmatize the people doing legitimate business. Some will hoard, but not all of them are hoarding. Their business is to retain the food in the country. So how come they did not move to them 6 months ago, 7 months ago? Food was expensive 7 months ago, but that is the nature of the business. They take the risk, they buy expensive and sell later. That's their business.
Sell later at a higher price. Yeah. Because I know sometimes we ask this question. Food prices, the increase in food prices, who do we blame, government or the sellers? And most of you say the government. But when you're hoarding food commodities to sell at a higher price.
So the question we should be asking is, why didn't government mop it up? Why? Why?
But this is just uncovered.
It's not uncovered. It's a legitimate business.
You're saying they're being victimized.
It is. The merchants I have produced in Jigawa. I have extensive exposure in Kano, Gombe, Yobe. These are legitimate traders. They buy and take the risk. Because you see, if the prices doesn't go up and it goes down, they lose money. So the FMCGs buy from them. So most farmers also hoard, if you want to use the word hoard, they buy the grains and store in their houses. It's not just in the north. That's the way it's done in the country. So when they want to start farming around April, May, farmers begin to sell the grains to be able to have cash. Most farmers don't keep cash in the bank. They keep cash as grains and begin to sell. So there's nothing some people will hoard. But most of these people, this is their business, in which they take loans at double digits for.
Well, if you say so. But, I mean, this is a new development, and I'm sure we'll get more perspective in the coming days. Now, let's get back to the focus of tonight's conversation. And I want us to have a honest and fruitful perspective from you. How bad? Yes. Okay. How bad is the state of Nigeria's economy as we speak?
In terms of food security,
absolutely,
it's really bad. It's really, really bad. Unfortunately, it was inherited. It is the lack of planning, and from the previous administration, lack of planning, lack of working with facts. I've come to various programs on TVC to say we're not doing effective monitoring and evaluation. Okay, because we're not monitoring, because we're not evaluating, take for instance, last administration's, many of the programs implemented by CBN, monitored by CBN, evaluated by CBN. CBN was doing almost everything themselves. So there's no room for checks and balances. They totally exempted the Ministry of Agriculture. Totally exempted them. So at the end of the day... I
think that's right.
Yeah. You see, that's what happened. You see, so what we're having today was like pre-COVID and during COVID. And that's why you find a lot of agri companies that have gone down. So bottom line is the administration inherited a very bad situation, and let me use the word, an underestimated bad scenario until they got into office to now discover also that some of our silos, not some, almost all our silos have been privatized. No nation privatizes their silos. They ought to build more. You know, they ought to encourage the private sector, give them incentives to build. So you privatized it and you also did not release it to them.
Okay.
So the people who even paid, you didn't release it for years. So those people who paid hundreds of millions could not even produce to come and store in those silos. That is why we are where we are. Because if you don't really analyze the underlying factors, we will be using wrong assumptions. Interventions are not bad in Nigeria. It's the assumptions that they use in projecting the outcomes is always what is faulty. It looks always simple, but it's not easy to implement. So that's a major challenge here now.
Right, so apart from the privatization of the silos, what are the other factors responsible for this rising cost in food, goods and services?
One also is that we focus too much on the northern part of the country for production. We've not diversified the value chain. We've not diversified agriculture in Nigeria. I have been shouting for a while, the northerners we need to have a lot of factories, modular and commercial, where they are processing everything produced because they have the climate for a lot of our vegetables. So the northern region ought to be processing, while the other southern region ought to be producing the fresh foods. So tomato has no business coming from the north to the south.
It's perishable.
It's perishable. If it is converted into paste and puree, it makes a lot of sense. The farmers will be richer. We would have a lot in the economy, while the southern part produces fresh tomatoes for the southern part. And so we've been using old syllabus. We've been farming for old school, not for the future. So the data we are using, the data is old. We don't have data. If you go online, you will still see Nigeria has 19 million cows. That data is about 20-year-old, but that is what everybody is quoting. You hear Nigeria has about 34 million hectares of land. Many lands have been opened in the last 40 years. It's not captured. So we're always using wrong data, focusing on foreign organizations who have some having ulterior motives to be able to create channels to get donor funding instead of giving the reality. Nigeria has not invested in data, so we can't plan properly. So, and also, we've found, I would say the Southwest, most especially, the Southwest governments at state and local governments need to also take responsibility for this. But when we broaden it, all governors of the country, they've all not maximized their agricultural potential. But yet, when it comes to election time, they are always in the rural communities sweet-talking the farmers to vote. But after voting, they don't deliver. They do something, they do like 1-2% and make a lot of noise about it, but also One of the things I'm not seeing, okay, is I'm not seeing the current administration also amplify opportunities. I've said it many times, every adversity has opportunities. We have not been talking about the opportunities. We've been reacting. 8 months ago, if you play back when I was here, when the state of emergency was declared, you'll be shocked with the things I said, that none has been implemented now. And not just because I said it, industry experts were on the same page with it. So there's a disconnect. We're recycling problems. I normally would say challenge, but this is a problem now. We're recycling it. It's looking like, some people in administration currently are also towing the old route, which is always sit in the office, design a program, and say it will work, as against picking things from the base and allowing people to say what will work. I have said it, fixing the problem of food insecurity in Nigeria is simple, can be done in 6 months. Can be done. We can see a major shift in 6 months, but we don't have the right people in the right offices.
Do you think this is also an issue centered around political will?
No, I can say this. The political will from the president is there. That I can say.
So let's talk about state governors, local government chairmen, and how they can contribute their own quota to this crisis we have on our hands. What are your expectations from that?
One is for them to be held accountable for the resources. Take, for instance, we have river basins with dams and reservoirs almost in every state in this country, including Lagos. I operated when Lagos was operating 500 acres of river basin. Now those lands have been snatched, many cases in court, and that 500 acres is less than 100 or 120 now. So the governors are not protecting the agricultural projects that are federal. Okay? And most of these projects are in the suburbs, the rural communities. And they are all working with status quo. What do I mean by status quo? In Southwest now, you will find governors having budgets for diesel in the North. You will find in Southwest, none. The governors don't pay attention. South, Southeast. The South, the governors are totally disconnected with agriculture. They do programs for media, but when it comes to the real thing, they don't do it. So the governors, we focus too much on federal.
Absolutely.
The resources and infrastructure that federal has in every state, I can tell you, has not been leveraged across board. Even we celebrate the North, it is underutilized. Productivity in the North is extremely low. Okay. There is a lot of activity. We are doing the farming, but productivity. So instead of them getting maybe 10 tons, they are getting 3, 4. And yet we are happy and celebrating that food is coming from the North. What quality of food is coming from the North? Most of the tomatoes we plant in this country are 30-year-old varieties. That's what they call open pollinated. In Europe, those seeds come from Europe. Okay? And those seeds are extinct in Europe. If you want to buy, there's a particular one, UC82B. That's most of the tomatoes you see coming from the North. That variety is extinct in the North, in Europe. They only keep those seeds alive for Africa. But in Europe, they don't use it again. But they reproduce it for Africa. So bottom line is that we need to challenge the status quo, especially state governors. Let them tell us what they are doing with the open lands available. there are many open lands available that we are not utilizing. Even the river basin in the north that we talk about, many portions of those river basins are not functional. Either the canal, they need to desilt because there's a lot of sand in it, or places are not working. So you now hear, oh, DJ Jamari has 27,000 or 25,000 acres of irrigation in Jigawa. Effective, it may not be less than 15,000.
Oh.
I have gone around these things, so there's nothing anybody can package.
Let's stay on this for a minute. What kinds of target interventions can come from state governors and the local governments to their people?
Now, we need to rejig our definition of smallholder farmers. Okay, the smallholder farmers we're talking about are they are mostly 60s. Okay, many of these 60-year-old men, when you bring interventions and you say it's for the youth, bring your child, across the country, they will not allow their children to utilize the land so that they can share profit. I have funded quite a number of projects, and I have people who have funded those projects. So we need to redefine. We need to target the sons and daughters of farmers in rural communities. See, government has its fault. State governors have their fault. But the farmers, the 60-year-old farmers, have been used to getting this intervention input and selling them. I will tell you the truth. I witnessed one in Northeast. They were loading in one place, giving them the same supplier, parked the trailer opposite, and was buying back at the price. So, yes, we can talk about, but the younger ones who are desperate, who have aspiration, who still want to make it big, many of them, we need to engage them. Then, we're not talking about mechanization. Nigeria will not be food secure if we're not mechanizing. Okay? And when I say mechanization, I'm not talking about big equipment. Small equipment. We need to copyright what they do in Indonesia, India, Malaysia. We run different judicial system. We run almost everything the same. And small holding. If you go to India, the average size of land per farmer is about 3 plots. In Nigeria, is about 3 acres. So bottom line is we're copying the developed countries. And we're not looking at the countries who used to be at our level, and now they've moved on to rank, like India ranks 1 to 10 in most agricultural produce. So we need mechanization, small mechanization. We need to remove the drudgery. We're saying our youths are not going into farming. I will not encourage youths to go into the kind of farming their parents are doing because it's not profitable. So give them small equipment where they see something modernized that they can work with. Yet, you just give them fertilizer, give them seed. Most of interventions do not give farmers improved seeds, hybrid seeds. They don't. It's the very cheap seeds that will make them, recycle results. Because hybrid seeds is like 3 times, 4 times the price. So let interventions give farmers inputs that will make them match up with Europe and US. And you will see that from one plot, they can triple or quadruple the results. So the same effort will get more results. Those are interventions. Fertilizers, that they give. Also, many of the fertilizers are very low quality. So interventions with smallholder farmers, if you go into agriculture today and you hear that it's 10 bags that you should use ideally, I can tell you a chunk of that 10 bags is adulterated. So you need actually 20, which is added cost. So government needs to walk through the private sector now, and not just like the anchor borrower. The anchor borrower was a good program implemented badly. What do I mean? Now you say people should go and look for 50,000, 100,000 farmers. Foreign, when we bring foreign things to Nigeria, we should copy, adapt, and paste before we adopt. Copy, adapt. So our communal system, we operate in 10, 20, 30. When Nigeria was working, that was how we worked Nigeria. When cocoa, granite, when all these things were selling, it was 10, it was 20. You now tell a farmer, or you tell a businessman to bring collateral running into hundreds of millions that others don't have. So they now bring farmers together. Farmers they don't know. Farmers they don't understand the system. The anchor borrower needs to be rejigged, not cancelled, to making sure an anchor which someone can go and get 50 farmers and get funding for 50 farmers, 30 farmers. That's how it will work. That is what used to work. You don't discard a winning team. That is what works in other climates, and Nigeria just needs to embrace what works again.
We've always had an implementation problem. Yes. Why?
Because our assumptions are always wrong. Like rice, since President Gowon, Nigeria has been trying to be rice secure. How many years ago? And yet, we're even not close. There's this wrong data around Nigeria as the leading in Africa. Nigeria is not the leading in Africa. Nigeria is only leading because Egypt decided to cut back on their rice because they needed the water. It was taking too much water. So if they wake up today and say, oh, we're going to cultivate more, Nigeria will become number 2. So if we've been trying to be rice secure for about 60 years or so, then we need to know that something is not working. We need to test and say what is not working and not recycle it. But every administration keeps recycling it. We keep recycling, and now we want to work through associations. One good thing that this administration has said is we're not working through associations. Associations have been politicized. Cooperatives are better. It's association that bought form for 100 million for somebody. Okay, so no associations. Associations are used to siphon money. So the ESCOs of most of the associations at federal, not state. The state associations are still better. At federal, they use them to siphon money. So many SMEs don't join associations because they only use you to package. And many of us have been involved in many that they just package and move on.
That seemed like a revelation. Mr. Mogaji, let's take a break. And when we come back, we will